This is the design of the alpha. This is a leader and somebody with the role of a leader. With that 51st gate in his undefined ego center, there is this need to be first about leading the way into a certain field. In this case, his field of psychology. I believe he coined the term the collective unconscious. This notion that what is on the inside of me that I can hardly even be aware of is also inside of you. That we actually share the unconscious field, and it could even be a superconscious field that goes beyond our individual thinking capacities, and yet we're not fully aware of what's going on in there. Hello there, and welcome to Dharma Science Radio Celebrity Analysis. Today we're getting a little bit psychological, and we're going to speak about Carl Gustav Jung. And before that, I simply wish to share with you my hope, which is that these sharings allow you a greater insight into the mechanics of human design so that you can learn to see what's at play in the forces of life in a clear, clean, and concise way. And so without further ado, let's hop right on into the chart. So right away we can tell we're looking at a generator aura type. You can see right here that there's a defined sacral center, which means this being is here to respond to life. And that the natural tendency of the mental programming is to attempt and initiate the life, to go out there and get it, to make it happen, to have their impact on the world and make their life what they want it to be. And yet the only way to activate the true, genuine, lasting, and differentiation of satisfaction is through this process of trusting in the timing of life and waiting to respond as a method of decision making. Now that's the strategy for this aura. The authority is over here in the solar plexus center. This is all about emotionality. There is no truth in the now. This is deep, deep, powerful feelings. You see, this person has this gate of the clinging fire. This is about fate. And this channel is about recognition. Not only the recognition of oneself, it is the recognition by the forces of life. This can be very mystical in that sense, very deep into the human experience that we as humans wish to be recognized by the forces of life and given that recognition. And so this person, Carl Gustav Jung, was an emotional generator. It means that truth is not available in the now, and he would need to wait in order to find clarity about things. And from my studies into his work, which is fairly minimal, I believe he had spent a lot of time on his own, in his own world and in his own field. And I believe that had to do with seeking clarity. For one reason or another, when you find this emotional system defined, you find somebody who is very deep in their feelings. You see, as emotional beings, we feel very powerfully, and sadly that wave of feeling is never a substitute for the clarity that is found with patience, by sleeping on it, by waiting a little bit in order to actually feel through the equation, not to think it through as we are so tempted to do, to simply feel it through and allow the body to give the mind the clarity it is seeking so very much. And so on the fundamental level, that is what would bring the deepest satisfaction to a being with this form of design. However, we know that Carl did not have a connection with human design. He did not know about his inner authority and type strategy as an emotional generator. And so what does that mean? Fundamentally, it means that there are a few forces in his life that have been more attractive to him than his own truth. And this is of no one's fault of their own. This is purely what allowed us to survive as human beings and dominate the world, basically, to become the top dog of the food chain. And that's our genetic imperative to reproduce and our natural attraction to what we are not. The fact that the mind is drawn into what you are not, and that becomes the theme of the mind, is a genetic imperative that's important for us naturally, fundamentally, from our carnal urges, so that these vehicles, these bodies, and the evolutionary process could occur with genetic stability. For we need diversity in order to have fertility. However, in the modern world, we do not need to simply seek out diversity for diversity's sake. Simply being unique does not mean being polished. It does not mean being deeply attenuated. It does not mean being deeply in touch with one's unique differentiation potential, which is what that strategy and authority is all about, nurturing that differentiation. However, in the ordinary person who is simply following their mind and doing what other people have told them, or what their mind tells them, we find a different program at play, which was useful for survival. However, it's not a differentiation program. So it may not be the most satisfying, it may not be the most successful, it may not be the most peaceful, and it may not be the most surprising. Now, first off, we know that this person is a split. They are a simple split in their mechanism, which means that if I look down here, we can see this 30 and the 41 defining the solar plexus to the root center, and we can see this 4253, this channel of maturation, defining the sacral center to the root. And then on the other side, we see the 5710 defining the sense of self with the splenic center, and we see the 31-7 defining that sense of self with the throat center. And we can see that there's a 50 here, there's a 54, there's a 38, there's a 14, and there's a 35. Any of these gates would function as a bridge that connects their split. It connects the two halves inside of this person with each other. Now, fundamentally, in the mind of a split definition person, we are most interested in bridging this split and getting in touch with that feeling of wholeness we find when the two halves inside of us are connected together as a whole. This means that the energy exchange within us is able to complete its cycle in a natural, clean, quick, efficient way. And the natural process here is not exactly that. The natural process and the recommendation is to accept that as a split definition, you have two halves inside of yourself, and they won't always be able to communicate immediately. And so it can be valuable to have a person around who bridges your split. However, if you can accept that you have these two halves that don't always directly communicate, you'll find that self-acceptance is a lot more sustainable and stable than reliance or codependence on another person to provide what your mind has convinced that you lack. When there is no such thing as lack. We have everything. It's merely differentiation imprints or receptive to wisdom. And so the fundamental themes here that this person is looking for in their mind would be this 38, for example. This 38 is the gate of the fighter, and it makes this channel of struggle, this willingness to really fight for what you believe in and to know what's worth potentially sacrificing your wellness for. This 54 is about ambition. This is about rising up the hierarchy. This is about immense power, I want to say. This is about affluence. This is about being in touch with this rising up through the forces of life. And it makes this 3254 channel of transformation on the material plane. The 50th gate here is about having the instinct or the intuition to know what to care for. The 27 on the other half is the energy to say yes to caring for things or people. And so without that 57, he doesn't exactly know what to care for. He has the energy to care, and yet he's seeking what to care about. Without this 14th gate, there could be a lack of power. There could be a lack of raw energy to dedicate towards his second gate. For this gate number 2 is the most receptive. It is purely yin, feminine lines that are deeply receptive and give orientation in the life. And without the 14, there is no raw transformative energy that rises up into that new direction. Without the 35, this can be lacking awareness of when one is full, of when it is time to move on. For you see, with this 36 here, there is the need to actually penetrate into a new experience. There is the need to have inexperience or a lack of experience turn into experience. And this can be deeply involved with crisis. For if you have no experience and yet you're going into it, you don't know what you're doing. And that can bring about a crisis. And the 35 on the other end is the fullness. This 35 is, okay, we've had enough, we're done with this, we're moving on to the next thing. And it forms this channel of the jack of all trades. So fundamentally, we're seeing a mind that really thinks it knows when enough is enough, really thinks it has the power to make transformation happen. It thinks it knows what to care about. It thinks that it is able to rise up in the hierarchy, and it thinks that it's a deep and powerful fighter in order to really make something happen. You know, I mentioned earlier that this is a generator who's here to respond. However, in the not self, in the mentally driven life, this person is pretending to be a manifester because they are struggling and fighting to rise up the hierarchy with their powerful skills because they know what to care about and they know when to stop and move on. However, all of that is false. They don't know any of those things. What they have and what they are is truly vastly different. For you see, we spoke a moment about this 4130, this channel of recognition, this desire wave about being recognized by the forces of life, because as a 41st gate, this is a gate of fantasy. This is a gate of desire. And that 30th gate is all about fate. This is you get what you get. And on the other side of this definition structure, we have the 4253. This is a channel of maturation. This is about going through cyclical patterns in life and going forward in such a way that old things resurface in a new way as one is maturing through cycles of beginnings, middles, and ends. This is a cyclical format energy for the abstraction collective process. And in their other side, on their other split, we have the 5710. This is the perfected form, where you see the 10 is where behavior of self fundamentally comes from, and this 57 is where there is a deep and powerful penetrative insight and intuition into what there is to be done. However, this is fully unconscious. And if you know anything about the unconscious channels in human design, you know that this means fundamentally that Carl did not know he did not identify with this notion of having this powerful intuition that guided his direction in life necessarily and guided his behavior. Now, since he has the 32 and he had the 48 in his personality differentiation imprint, he could be aware of the depth. He could be aware of his smell, his sense of, can this lead to transformation? Can this lead to success? He could be aware of that. However, the penetrative, gentle insight of the 57 is part of an unconscious definition to the 10. And that means that other people may notice, oh, wow, yeah, that was perfect. That was really cool. And you know, he had quite a legacy in the psychological sphere. And that could even be given to this 31-7, which was fully conscious in the personality imprint. This is the design of the alpha. This is a leader and somebody with the role of a leader. And with that 51st gate in his undefined ego center, there is this need to be first about leading the way into a certain field. In this case, his field of psychology. I believe he coined the term the collective unconscious. This notion that what is on the inside of me that I can hardly even be aware of is also inside of you. That we actually share the unconscious field, and it could even be a superconscious field that goes beyond our individual thinking capacities, and yet we're not fully aware of what's going on in there. And I can attribute that even to that 48th gate. This 48th gate is called the well. This is the deep, deep, deep unknown, fundamentally. For you see, the 16th gate functions as a scoop. It goes into the 48 and it pulls something out from the unknown. However, he wasn't functioning through that 1648, which is the design of talent, of skills, of practice. He was coming through the 5710, 731. So that depth would be expressed because in his unconscious, his body would move and his voice would speak. Not because of the 1648 giving practice again and again and again, trialing and trialing and trialing and figuring it out, simply because he had this unconscious intuitive guidance that he could then consciously identify with and give a voice to, that could then have influence upon others' way of thinking. For you see, with this unconscious 33rd gate here, that gives this capacity to retreat into one's own space and make sense of things. This 33rd gate has this magnificent power to share along the generational lines the secrets that have been previously unknown. And the only way to make sense of these secrets is through retreating into one's own space, being alone, making sense of the unknown, finding the words, and then sharing it outward. Or in this 23rd gate, this is a gate of assimilation. This is a gate that breaks down vibrations and puts them together in a new order, into specific words that hopefully others can understand. And so back on that not-self side of things, we can see that this ego center is undefined. We can see that this person, Carl, most likely really wanted to receive approval from others. You know, he wanted to improve upon himself. He may not have accepted himself as he was because he wanted to be better than what he was. And that's fundamentally a trap of this undefined ego center, causing him this need to fight and struggle and rise up and to pretend he knows what to care for and that he knows when to move on. Up here in these wide open, undefined head center and ajna center, we find something very special. This is one of my favorite things to see when we notice that there is a center without any definition or any activation whatsoever. You see, there's no activated gates in the ajna, and there are no activated gates in the head center. Now, mystically, this means that in a previous lifetime, Mr. Jung had actually completely developed on the faculties of cognition and thinking, conceptualizing, and inspiration. He's mastered the forms of inspiration, whether they be abstract, whether they be logical, whether they be individual and mutative. He's mastered those themes of thinking. And so in this lifetime, everything that was going on up in his head that he was thinking about and then speaking about, giving words to, had nothing to do with him whatsoever. It had everything to do with the world in which he found himself and the potential to share some wisdom with the world, giving influence from his instinctual direction and ability to find satisfaction along that emotional wave. Because the real magic is whether or not somebody knows about their human design, there's still most likely going to be flavors of both their true self, their deepest, highest truth, and there's going to be flavors of their not self, of their fraudulent, mentally controlled life. And if one does not know the difference between the two, one is most likely being caught up between the two and being torn in two directions. What do I truly do? What am I here for? And this is why my blessing that I wish to bestow upon you is that you don't have to question who you are or why you are here. I wish for you to know exactly who you are and how you function, because you can see it like a movie unfolding before your eyes. And so that's about all I have for today. I hope you're doing well. Take care. Bye for now.
If you have enjoyed the show and would like to learn more about how all of this applies specifically to you, then kindly refer to the link in this video's description, Private Consultation. Here, we can dive into all of the details together in a recorded call. May your signature vibration of satisfaction, success, peace, and surprise find you in a good way.